Welcome everyone to the live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. I promise we have an incredible 30 minutes ahead of us. So thank you for tuning in. I'm Gulliver Parascandolo. I'm a director, I'm an author, and today we are celebrating the release of season 2 of our episodic fantasy series, Ways of Yonder. In today's live stream, we are going to be not only talking about the future of Yonder and what's going to be happening in season 2 and what you can expect later on in the series. Today, we are premiering the cinematic audiobook of episode 1 of Ways of Yonder. It'll be a great chance to hear some of the story, to see if you like it, to see if you want to get involved and join the adventure. For the one or two of you who may not know what the Ways of Yonder is, Ways of Yonder is a episodic, interactive fantasy series premiering on Amazon's Kindle Vella. It's a new service by Amazon that hosts episodic stories that you can read on your phone, Kindle, or computer. Season 2 of the Ways of Yonder is called The Floating City, where you and your companions have found yourself after the events of Gazir's farm. This new location is as much a lakeside paradise as it is a city filled with peril, dangers, intrigue, and a new cast of characters that will test you in entirely new ways. And of course, you will decide how the story ends. The Ways of Yonder Season 2 launches today and will be released every Saturday until April 1st. To me, Season 1 of The Ways of Yonder is about that point in your life when you realize how big the world is, and that transition from feeling like you have very little responsibility about how the world turns out to feeling like you are empowered, to feeling like you do have some responsibility to shape the world around you. And in season 2, I think you're tested in different ways. It's easy to start an adventure, but finding the will within yourself to keep going, finding the reasons to keep fighting or to keep building or to keep moving, and balancing your character between your desires and your responsibility is going to be a defining moment for your character in this story. Since the beginning, there's been a whole team behind this project that have really given it their all to make this project succeed. Everyone from my editor to the animation team and the graphic design team at Passage Productions, and of course the countless number of family, friends, my wife, and all the visionary colleagues that have helped bring this project to life. Season 2 will bring us up to 22 episodes. And when we first started this project nearly 2 years ago, I never thought that we would get here, that we'd be at a place where we are now going to be launching multiple seasons of this story. This has just been an inspiring ride, and it's made me want to put everything that I can into this project. Before we begin, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Comment below, smash that like button, smash that bell, smash that thumbs up, hit the hearts, do the thing. But seriously, thank you for everyone for joining the live stream. It means a lot to me that you're here watching this, and this moment was made for you. So without further ado, please enjoy the cinematic audiobook experience for episode 1 of The Ways of Yonder. The links are in the description below if you want to read the first 3 episodes for free and then continue the journey through season 2. Until then, your adventure awaits. The Ways of Yonder, written by Gulliver Parascandolo and edited by R.A. Reynolds. Episode 1, First Night, Part 1. The irregular rhythms of rain beat down on the rocky outcrop above you. This is the first night you've spent in the forest since you were a child. It is your first night traveling on the Western Road. Your first night traveling anywhere. The sounds of the wild pine forest are still very new.
The crack of distant branches, echoing through the trees, keeps your eyes scanning the darkness beyond your campfire. Creatures howl and shriek from distant hills. Clouds boil in ominous formations through the moonlit peaks of the Greyclaw Mountains. These are all perfectly natural occurrences one would expect to find in a forest at night, you tell yourself. Despite your affirmations, you find yourself very much on edge. Even though the day was long and your muscles ached, the feeling of sleep evades you. Your 2 traveling companions have been asleep for hours, sleeping back to back on the opposite side of the small campsite you made together. Their weapons are a finger length away from their resting arms. The pair had been traveling through the Wilderlands a full year before you met them, which was yesterday. You keep your sword close as well, Marley's sword. It's strange to find comfort in a weapon. Until yesterday, your chief concern in life had been turning down beds and serving drinks at the mountainside inn you had called home. Now you're not a hero, not entirely. A survivor, maybe. Everything has changed now. At this hour last night, you were covered in blood. The slain bodies of innocent townsfolk lying all around you. The blood of their murderers wet on the tip of your sword. The memories return to your mind, as they have since you began this journey. Streets of crimson snow, the war cries from the lake, carnage, bathed in the amber light of burning houses. You had never killed before, but doing so earned you a new destiny. Pain stabs at you from under the bandage wrapped around your waist as you feed more sticks into the fire. The night was cold, but the cold never bothered you. They said you were born of wind and snow. When you were but an infant, you were found alone, abandoned in the middle of a mighty blizzard. There was no sign of your parents, and no telling how a child had appeared in a basket just outside the small mountain village of Gelden. Your saver was an innkeeper and tavern master, Templeton Marley. Marley had come from the eastern city of Delbeige after his wife passed. Building an inn near the frontier had been their dream. He had only been in Gelden a few months before finding you in a thick winter blizzard during a hunting expedition. You were a child of only a few months, covered in a bundle of cloth. The village formed a search party to find your parents or any clue regarding your origin, but they found nothing. Marley had no heirs of his own, and when no one came to claim you, he made the responsibility his. Marley would always say, "It was the right thing to do, and I would expect anyone would have done the same." As the town innkeeper, he had no shortage of work to do, nor praise for your part in it. He was an attentive guardian, stern, and had no patience for repeating himself. But Marley was often jovial and made friends with whoever walked into the door. He was one of the most respected men in Gelden. Marley's tavern was the center of town, and is where you have lived since you came of age. Marley bequeathed the room to you directly above the tavern door. It was the loudest of any room in the inn, as every slam of the entrance door reverberated under your feet. A small window afforded you a view of the town, the ivory lake, and the wild frontier beyond. You'd grown accustomed to carrying a small leather-bound journal these last few years. It was the last thing you packed before you left home yesterday. You find yourself leafing through it. It was full of musings, drawings, and various notes related to the inn's business. You turned to the page where you had drawn a simple map of Gelden, a long row of buildings, homes, and stables wrapped around the curvy mountain road. You remember making this map with a scribe who had passed through Gelden 2 years ago. It was more of an exercise in cartography, really. Marley employed many travelers that he felt could teach you something. After a day of chores, he would often surprise you with a tutor. He would sit with you during your studies, listening as he went about his own bookkeeping, and added to the lessons when he felt his experience applied. You learned to read, write, and count. You were taught many words and phrases in foreign tongues to help barter with merchants from far-off lands. This past year, Marley had determined that you should also learn the ways of combat. He would say, "Man or woman, if you work in a tavern in the Wilderlands, you'd better know how to handle yourself in a fight." For 3 seasons, you trained twice a week, receiving lessons from passing soldiers and traveling mercenaries. You trained with Marley's old sword. It was a family relic from his youth that he kept beneath the bar. You had never thought of yourself as any kind of warrior. Still, you looked forward to fencing practice and felt that you were gaining some proficiency. It was a welcome change from the daily chores. If anything, you liked hearing the stories from these grizzled soldiers. Many of them had been at the Great Battle of Red Brine at the edge of the Great Sea. Others told tales of fighting in private armies in the Sandlands, conquering cities for would-be emperors. Some hinted at less than lawful exploits. "I am not paying you to sit and remember things that don't involve swinging steel," Marley would shout when he thought you were asking too many questions. Like everyone on the road, no one stayed for long. Gelden was a place you passed through, not a destination. You would often wonder what it would be like to see where the road ends. But even this was a challenge beyond your imagination. Hardly anyone in Gelden was ever concerned with anything outside of their small corner of the world. Though you've studied history and stories that describe distant and exotic places, you've never seen a complete map of the vast continent of Yonder. Lightning dashes across the sky. You feel the resounding thud of thunder in your chest. If you had been asleep, you would have just been startled awake. You glance back to your 2 companions. Yevon snores heartily. Frey, by contrast, is nearly silent. Seeing them lying so still and peaceful is almost out of character, considering the incredible feats you had seen them do just hours earlier. They had surprised you from the first moment you met. Gelden was the last vestige of civilization before the southern frontier. On the first day of each month, business tripled. On the eve of the new moon, folks arrived in Gelden from all over the Greyclaw Mountains to meet at Marley's Tavern. The familiar faces of farmers, herdsmen, fishermen, and workers from the lumber camps intermingled with newcomers and traders from the east and west. It made for a merry gathering and a full house. People made plans to spend the night in Gelden because, in the morning, League riders would arrive to receive and deliver parcels and letters. It was a village tradition to meet at Marley's the night before to make merry and share news. The people's anticipation to meet the League riders this month had been no different. The crowd was thick, enjoying hearty stews, bread, and ale at tables, catching up with friends old and new. You were everywhere at once, restocking the bar, escorting guests to their room, clearing plates away, and collecting due coin. You had just returned with a tray of clean mugs for Marley, when a sudden gust of cold winter air made you turn. A group of 4 men walked through the tavern entrance. The men were draped in layers of raw animal hides. Black lines and patterns were painted across their faces and barrel chests. The shortest of them stood an arm's length higher than your head. These men lived in the forests, killing and foraging, traveling in tribes and clans across the frontier. They chose to live by the old ways of the first people. These men were known as Wilders. They pushed past you and slowly made their way into the bar. All the guests in the inn went silent. The Wilders smirked at the faces staring back at them. They grunted out a few words between each other in their tribal language and laughed. They pounded their fists on the bar as Marley approached with full cups of ale and his customary smile. "Welcome, gentlemen. I am..." Marley began. They ripped the cups from his hands and devoured the ale, sloshing and spilling the brine down their throats and woven beards. The largest one shoved his empty cup hard into Marley's chest, nearly toppling the old man. Before he could recover, the Wilder's hands thrust forward and wrapped around Marley's throat. His other hand waved the empty cup in front of Marley's face. He screamed at Marley in the guttural Wilder language, as if he was insulted that the cup was now empty. Marley was grasping for air. The crowd of patrons stood petrified with fear, only able to watch. You acted without thinking. The bar stool flew from your hands and smashed mightily on the brute's head. It was enough to free Marley from the Wilder's grasp and send him crashing to the ground. The other 3 Wilders stopped laughing and turned. Their surprise quickly turned to anger. The patrons scattered as the 3 remaining Wilders charged towards you, tossing tables aside as they closed the distance. You backed up frantically, looking for something, anything you could use to defend yourself. You balled your hands into fists, ready to make your stand. The closest Wilder roared as his massive hands reached out to tear you apart. Suddenly, a cloaked figure stepped out of the shadows behind you. He intercepted the thug's outstretched wrist and twisted the arm sideways, redirecting the brute's momentum. The Wilder became twisted up in his own appendages. The cloaked man's other hand unleashed a series of blows with his elbows and fists. He swung his forearm across the Wilder's neck and lunged. The wild man's feet left the ground and flipped back, slamming forcefully into the chests of his 2 companions. The lot of them crashed to the floorboards. The stranger removed his cloak and threw it to the floor. He looked to be about your age. His face was rugged and chiseled, framed in a short crop of black hair. His muscular appendages were meticulously wrapped in ribbons of yellow fabric. A long curved sword rested in its sheath on his belt. Most strikingly, he had yellow eyes that flashed in the dim candlelight of the tavern, like a wildcat. He turned to you and said, "Fantastic hit earlier. Well done." He had a smile on his face, almost implying that the outcome of 4 enraged barbarians rising to their feet would be somehow entertaining. Thank you. Good attack yourself," was all you could muster to say. The largest Wilder was back on his feet, screaming and kicking the others off the floor. They rallied quickly. You saw an iron candlestick that had been tossed on the floor. You grabbed it and joined the stranger at his side. "You don't have an extra sword, do you?" you asked him. "An extra? No. But you won't need one. I think these gentlemen will listen to reason." The massive Wilder reached behind him and pulled out a long, jagged dagger. This was no longer a barroom tussle. This was now a fight to the death. You steeled yourself, waiting for the impending attack. They were sizing you up as well, and they liked their odds. They spread out in front of you, smiling like wolves surrounding a pair of helpless sheep. The stranger appeared to hardly notice as he casually tapped the hilt of his sword with his finger. Their leader screamed, and all 4 Wilders charged.
"Dothalo!"
A woman's voice rang out over the fracas. The Wilders froze before taking their next step. Approaching your flank was a cloaked female figure. Her right hand grasped a bow. The bow's limbs were made of 2 long white antlers, like those of a deer or an elk. She held her bow sidelong. 4 arrows were clutched between the fingers of her draw hand, flaying out on the top edge of the bow's limbs. Each arrow was pointing directly toward one of the Wilders, ready to launch. When the Wilder shifted, the arrows subtly shifted with them, maintaining their aim. "Cambre dago, fila daskach, cum fistasa." The woman spoke in the same guttural sounds of the Wilder language. The leader glared at the woman and then back at you, considering his options. His companions looked rightfully nervous. He slowly took a step back and grunted words to his men. They all turned and walked back to the door. The woman arced around the room, keeping her bow trained on them every step of their retreat. Before leaving, the large Wilder turned back, shook his fist, and shouted, "Go Hells!" Then the Wilders turned and walked back outside into the falling snow. The adrenaline was coursing through your body. The room was silent, save for the creaking sound of the archer's bowstring relaxing. "Marley!" You ran back to the tavern bar, where the old man slowly made it back to his feet. He was rubbing the welts that were forming on his throat. I'm fine, but I may never sing again." The words strained out of his throat, but the levity was a welcome relief to all. The murmur of conversation started once more. Next to you, a large leather pack dropped onto the bar top. It was a patchwork of pockets, folds, and rolls. The woman archer had removed her cloak and stood next to you, undoing a pair of clasps on the pack. Her face was pale and beautiful. Her long amber hair was tied in braids that flowed from the top of her head and fell loosely down her neck and back. Her clothing was a patchwork of leather and yellow cloth, with small metal plates sewn into the shoulders, elbows, and forearms. The woman looked at you and Marley. She had the same striking yellow eyes as the other stranger. She set a wooden cup down in front of Marley. She cracked open a small spotted egg into it. Then she twisted open the top of an acorn she had fashioned to keep a small portion of powder. She stirred up the concoction with the empty acorn husk and handed Marley the small cup.
"Drink this," the woman said. "It will help the swelling and restore your voice."
Marley took the cup, but his gaze was locked onto the woman's eyes.
"Pardon the question, madam,"
Marley said, examining the drink.
"Might you hail from Breckenwood?"
"I do,"
she replied.
"Then I shall consider this an honor."
And he drank. He did his best to ignore the taste, but his wince gave away the flavor. The yellow-eyed man walked over.
"She's not much of a cook, but she's a born healer."
After a few moments, Marley's grimace changed into a look of surprise, and then a smile.
"Remarkable!"
His voice was already clearer.
"What is this?"
The woman smiled, seemingly happy with the medicine's results.
"Calinus root, thyme, dried court flour, and ginger. It should also help dull your pain for a few hours,"
the woman said, securing a pack. "This is all wrong," you protest. "We should be offering you drinks."
"Yes," Marley agreed. "For the two heroes."
"Two?"
the woman questioned.
"I would say there was one,"
the man quipped back.
"It's easy to follow someone into battle. It takes much more bravery to lead the charge.
I'd say you were the real hero." All eyes in the inn turned to you, followed by cheers and applause.
"Let's call it 3 drinks then,"
Marley said. He was beaming with pride as 3 brimming ales hit the bar top.
"And of course, your stay at the inn will be taken care of. For you and your, wife?"
The pair of strangers shared a chuckle.
"I am Yevon Vexmere, and this is my twin sister, Frey."
Under the outcropping, the rain subsides into a lonely patter. The fury of the night storm was moving on, leaving calm in its wake. The respite reminded you of the hours you spent drinking that night with the pair of siblings from Breckenwood Forest. Those were the hours when you still felt like the worst was behind you, and your only worry was gleaning what you could from their experiences growing up in the legendary forest. You continue writing all that you can remember. Frey, I have to know, what did you say to those wilders? You ask, laying down 3 new frothy mugs of ale.
"Upka, the Wilder's native tongue, is hard to translate into common speech. But roughly I said, 'Death is in front of you. Be brave and leave alive.'"
Frey spoke into her cup of ale, letting her voice echo for dramatic effect.
"It was the scariest thing I knew how to say. For what I know about the language, I could have very well asked him if he prefers squirrels for breakfast."
She laughed into the foam of her mug. The drink had certainly made her more lively than before, you noted. "Where did you learn to speak with wilders?" you asked.
"My master had many tablets written in Upka. Their people are uncommonly familiar with plants that cause the mind and body to become more vigorous. They ingest them before going on long trips to enhance endurance, or before a battle to mask their fear. I learned their language to study their methods."
"We know too much of the Wilder's ways,"
Yevon said through gritted teeth. The drink had made Yevon a bit more dour.
"My sister and I spent most of our lives learning our crafts,"
Yevon continued. "Both of us trained away from our families. Last year, Frey and I made the trip back home after completing our training. When we returned to our village, we found only ashes
and death. Our family was murdered, killed by wilders."
His last words hung deep in his throat. Yevon finished the last of the drink and clapped the cup on the table.
Wilders have been pillaging all the villages near the frontier.
Frey put a steady hand on her brother's back and continued.
We lost everyone. Yevon and I have been on the long road since summer. We tried to find the Wilders who attacked our people. We followed their trail south, through the frontier, but lost them once the snow came. We took Seeker's Pass to the western road, and here we are.
I never knew my family, so I never felt the pain of losing them, you say. What you experienced must have been unbearable. Please accept my sympathies. Our circumstances pave the way for our future. You cannot move forward if you are always reading the trail behind you, Yevon said. Where will you go after you leave Gelden? You asked. Yevon perked up. We will travel across yonder, take jobs where we can find them, and be on the lookout for the Akaratu. Akaratu, you ask?
It is one of our oldest stories. We believe that someday, the old magic will deliver a savior back to yonder. We were taught as children to act as if the savior is already among us. It could be anyone, even though the person may not know it themselves. It's a story for children, perhaps, but it's the tale that inspires everyone born in Breckenwood to use their talents to benefit all of yonder.
The Akaratu must prove themselves worthy, of course, Yevon interjected. I'm nearly certain none of those wilders were the Akaratu.
The evening had grown late, and most travelers had found their beds. Marley was extinguishing the candles and lamps at the empty tables.
Friends, the hour grows late for this innkeeper, Marley said, folding his apron. I bid you good night and safe travels. Thank you for keeping the peace.
Marley headed up the stairs to his room. All at once, you knew the night was finally coming to an end. Yevon inhaled a deep yawn.
We will leave at first light, but we will make plans to stay at your tavern if we pass through the mountains again.
Frey's words were hopeful, but like all who passed through this town, it was likely you would never see them again. You felt a shared kindred spirit with Yevon and Frey. You were all orphans after all. At least you'd have the story to tell, you thought to yourself. Yevon and Frey were collecting their belongings when a final question entered your mind. Frey, when the large wilder was about to leave, he yelled back something. Cohorts! What does that mean? Frey thought for a moment before answering.
It means unworthy.
You retired to your room, having no idea that this would be the last night you would sleep in your small bed in Marley's tavern. You had been living in that room since you came of age. You knew the contents of every cupboard, the sound of every floorboard as it creaked under your feet. You took a moment to gaze out of your solitary window. You often thought that, save for the snowfall in winter, a painting of the view would have been just as unchanging as Gelden itself. Your companions are still sleeping by the campfire as the night becomes its coldest, challenging your shivering fingers to keep writing in your journal. You throw the last bundle of sticks on the fire, then lay down to continue scribing. Daylight would rise over the mountain in a few hours. You think back to this time last night, when you awoke to the sound of screams. You shudder at the memories. Memories of death and fire. Memories of what happened next. Am I still dreaming? You awoke from your bunk upstairs at the inn, the red glow from the window choking out all the color in your room. You jumped up and opened the shutters. Below, the village of Gelden was burning. People ran in panic, fleeing from their homes at the lake's edge. Merchants and travelers were desperately trying to free their carts and wagons, but their animals had fled. Fiery blazes erupted from the cottage roofs behind them. The snow that had fallen during the night was streaked red across the main road. Then, through the embers and ash, you saw them. Dozens of boats had landed on the shoreline of the lake. you saw the figures of men holding torches streaming into the village. Savage cries echoed across the valley. The Wilders were invading.